One of the most crucial things a beginner should learn is the basic strokes. These are the fundamental strokes that make up the letters. Here's a quick rundown of the 8 basic strokes you need to know. Upstroke, downstroke, underturn, overturn, compound curve, oval, ascending loop, and descending loop. Learning calligraphy without these strokes is like trying to draw without understanding anatomy. You can do it, but knowing the basics will drastically improve your form and technique. When I started, I had no clue about these strokes, and my early work was, well, let's just say it was a learning experience. So here's how the basic strokes work. Let's look at letter A for example. You can see that we have the upstroke, the oval, and then the underturn. So you see how letter A is just not one big giant blob and it's actually divided into 3 segments that you could easily replicate? Let me give you another example, the letter B. You can see that the letter B is the upstroke, the ascending loop, and then a reverse oval. So once again, instead of writing all the letters in one go, you know how to break them down, which makes your calligraphy much easier to do. This also helps when you practice, so you know where you're lacking instead of just being confused why your letters don't look good. Here's how you're going to do them. I've made a free worksheet that you can download by visiting the link in my description. So I've talked quite a lot about guidelines before, so let me introduce them to you and explain to you how they work. Okay, so this is the guideline. In the center, you have something called the X height. The X height is the space between the baseline and the waistline. It is the space that you write in. Then you have what is called the ascenders and the descenders. The ascender is for letters like letter B, where the letter extends up. The descender is for letters like letter J, where the letter goes down. In this tutorial, we'll only talk about the first ascender and the first descender. The second descender and the second ascender are for more complicated techniques like flourishing. So our focus for the rest of the video will be everything from the first ascender to the first descender. Okay, so now that I've cleared that up, let's move on to doing the basic strokes. So I've put the overview of the 8 basic strokes on top of the worksheet so you can have a look while you're practicing. Please know that the worksheet you see in this video compared to the one you'll be downloading is different. It has been modified for better understanding.
Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Let's start with the first one, the upstroke. So here I have traceables that you can trace along as you follow my instructions, and some free space so that you can try it on your own. The upstroke requires light pressure, so hold your pen at an angle and use light pressure as you go up. Remember, all your strokes should be parallel to the slant line. Be slow and steady. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make are rushing through the strokes. Your strokes should not look like flicks. They should be a steady, consistent, thin line. Another mistake beginners make is aggressively pushing their brush pen into the paper before they start the stroke. This leads to the pooling of ink at the edge of the stroke. Be very careful of this mistake. Your pressure should be consistent from the start to the end of the upstroke. When you freehand your upstrokes, make sure they look as similar as possible. Try your best to keep them at the same angle and same consistency. Here I'm just demonstrating how I do my upstrokes, and as you can see, they look very consistent. Downstroke. The downstroke is practically opposite of the upstroke. It's much easier to do because you have to use heavy pressure instead of light pressure. Once again, remember to keep your stroke parallel to the slant line all the way from the waistline to the baseline. You should feel the nib of your pen pressing hard against the paper as you go down. However, do not press your pen super hard or your ink might start to spread. The pressure should be heavy enough to create a downstroke, but not heavy enough that it looks forcefully done. Do you see how nice these last two look compared to the previous ones? They look more steady, more stable, and well done. Let's move on to something more challenging, the underturn. This stroke is something many beginners make a mistake in because they rush through it. The underturn basically is a downstroke combined with the upstroke using a curve. And this is why your technique really comes into play over here because you have to know how to adjust your pressure. So we're going to start with a downstroke, and as you reach towards the baseline, you're going to lift up your pen slowly and transition into the upstroke. So I'll demonstrate it using a larger brush pen so you can truly understand how this works. Okay, so downstroke, go down, start slowly lifting up your pen, and just as you reach the baseline, you will slowly transition into an upstroke all the way back to the waistline. So I'll demonstrate it again. Downstroke, start slowly lifting up your pen as you reach towards the baseline. Do you see how I transition so smoothly from a downstroke into this almost upstroke? Do you see how smooth my curve is as I transition? That is what we are aiming for in an underturn. The pressure starts to decrease as you reach towards the bottom and then you go back up, okay? So one mistake beginners make is when they're transitioning into the curve, they lift up their pen too fast. And as you can see over here, that's the mistake I've made with this underturn. The curve is not smooth. The transition into the curve is not smooth. It is choppy, it is rigid. It is supposed to be a very, very smooth transition from the downstroke back to the upstroke. So a lot of beginners will do something like this or something like this, which are both incorrect methods. Okay, let's go back to the practice sheet. Don't shy away from making mistakes. You're gonna struggle with doing this. Even I still struggle sometimes. You won't get it immediately on your first try, and that's okay. Do not panic. Just continue practicing. Here I'm demonstrating a freehand one. Remember to keep your strokes parallel to the slant line no matter what. Another thing I would like to point out is that your underturn should look symmetrical on both sides. So if you were to draw an imaginary line going down in the middle, it should look the same on both sides. So you can see that some of these over here are too wide, which is something that you should avoid as much as possible. Let's move on to the overturn. The thing about the underturn and the overturn is the fact that they're practically mirrored. They're practically the opposites of each other. So theoretically, if you flip the underturn around, it should become an overturn. So you see, if I flip my paper around, now the overturn looks like the underturn, and the underturn looks like the overturn. So one way you can check if you're doing your overturn and the underturn right is if you flip them around after doing them. Okay, so let's start. Once again, the same thing as the underturn, but it's the other way around. So I'll demonstrate using a larger brush pen just so you can understand it a bit better. So this time we start with the upstroke. So we're going to start really light from the baseline. And as you start to near the waistline, your pressure is going to start to increase. So for the underturn, it started to decrease, right? But for the overturn, it'll start to increase. As you start to reach towards the waistline, slightly increase your pressure, do a turn, and then come back down with a downstroke. So I'll demonstrate it again. So upstroke, you're reaching the waistline, increase the pressure slowly, do a turn, and then go back down with a downstroke. So just like the underturn, make sure that your upstroke and downstroke are parallel to each other. And if you were to draw an imaginary line going down the middle, they should look mirrored to each other. So if you're struggling with the overturn, just put a line down the middle to check if your overturns are too far apart or too close to each other. Do you see the turn over here? The turn is not even. It leans too much towards the left side. But the turn is even on the second one. So by looking at these two things, you can check if your overturn is done incorrectly. So let's go back to the practice sheet. So once again, start with the upstroke, and as you reach the waistline, slightly increase your pressure, do a curve, and then go down with a downstroke with full pressure. So I'll freehand some of these overturns. And I'm checking if I did it correctly by using the 2 key points that I taught you just a while back. Let's move on to the compound curve. So the compound curve is basically the combination of the underturn and the overturn. This basic stroke is a tricky one to master. So let me grab my larger brush pen again for demonstration. So the first part of the compound curve is the overturn. So you go up, do a curve, come down, and transition into an underturn. So notice if I cover up half of the compound curve, it looks like the overturn. And if I were to cover this side of the compound curve, it would look like the underturn. Ideally, you want the compound curve to look symmetrical as much as possible. So let me explain it once again. You start with the upstroke, and as you near the turn, you're going to slowly increase the pressure, and then use heavy pressure to create a downstroke as you go down. And then you'll switch into an underturn by slowly decreasing the pressure and then transitioning back into an upstroke. So one thing you can do if you feel like you're unable to do the compound curve in one single motion is to do the overturn first and end it with a flick. So you can do an overturn first, and as you start to reach towards the baseline, slowly transition into an underturn, but end it with a flick first. So this will help you get into the groove of changing your pressure. You can also try it the other way around by starting with the flick on top and then doing an underturn. You may have noticed that when I start to go down and start to transition, I take a little break. Now, I don't know if that's actually recommended, but I find that that works best for me if I cannot do the compound curve in one single motion. It still creates a seamless transition, as you can see, so you can try this method to see if it helps you. So the two main points to remember is that the compound curve should be symmetrical on both sides because it's just basically the overturn and the underturn. And you can practice your transitions by practicing the flicks that I've shown you here. One thing to note is that you should do these slowly. Please do not rush through the compound curve. Don't go down aggressively, don't use extreme pressure. Go really slowly at the turns and master the way that you change your pressure as you're turning. So let's go back to the practice sheet. So upstroke, turn, downstroke, turn, upstroke. I'll freehand one to show you again. Upstroke, turn, downstroke, turn, and up. Upstroke, turn, downstroke, turn, and up. So a side note, the overturn, the underturn, and the compound curve will take a bit of time to master. Hang on tight, we're nearly done. Just 3 more. Let's move on to the next one, the oval. So there's a few different ways that you can do an oval, but I'll teach you how I do it. Start by creating an imaginary point in the middle of the X height. From here, create a straight upstroke that goes all the way up to the waistline. Then do a curve going the opposite way and bring it back down to the baseline. Then do a turn again and go back to the initial starting point. So again, this is how I do my ovals. But I've also seen ovals being taught like this. So start towards the edge of the waistline, do a downstroke that goes all the way down to the baseline, do a turn and do an upstroke, then bring it back all the way to the waistline and connect with your initial starting point. So you can use whichever method is more easier for you to do. Your oval should look like a slanted letter O. So one way to know that you're doing your oval right is to draw an imaginary line going down the middle, and if it's symmetrical on both sides, then you're doing it correctly. So this is another one of those harder strokes to master, so don't worry about messing it up. Remember to keep your ovals spaced nicely, don't make them too narrow or too wide. One common mistake beginners make is that the starting and ending point of the oval is not the same. You're often able to see the overlap in the strokes, which is incorrect. Make sure the starting and the ending point of your ovals line up with each other. It should be a seamless transition. You shouldn't be able to tell where you started and where you finished. So 2 key things to keep in mind. Be really slow at the turns. Your turns should be smooth and your oval should be symmetrical on both sides. And where you start is where you should finish. Let's go back to our practice sheet. So here I've done a few freehand ovals, as you can see. And some of these have the issue of overlapping strokes. So keep in mind that try your best to not have that issue as much as possible. Your oval should look seamless. The strokes should blend into each other very nicely. And remember to have that imaginary line going down the middle to ensure that your ovals are like equal on both sides. Ascending loop. The ascending loop is one of the easier strokes for beginners in my opinion. And so let's have a deeper dive into how the stroke works. You start the ascending loop from the waistline, then you go up to the first ascender, do a turn, and come back down with a downstroke all the way back to the baseline. So it's almost like a 1, 2, 3 kind of movement. So let me explain it using my larger brush pen. So once again, this is our waistline, this is our baseline, and that is our first ascender. You're going to start with your brush pen on the waistline, and you're going to do an upstroke all the way to the first ascender. As you do your upstroke, you're going to do a bit of a curve towards the end, almost like the underturn overturn situation, but the opposite. So remember, for the underturns, the curve was going this way. But for the ascender loop, it's going to go the other way around, almost like how I taught you in the oval. So you do an upstroke and your pressure gets lighter on the top. Then you do a turn and come back down with heavy pressure all the way to the baseline. So let me do that again. Start from the waistline, go up all the way to the first ascender, do a turn, and then do heavy pressure coming back all the way to the baseline. So one thing about the ascender loop is that your loops should not be too thick or too thin. So don't have your loops looking like this. And don't do this either. Your loops should look something like this. Do a nice loop, something like this. And remember to follow the slant line. Remember to have your strokes parallel to the slant line. So a mistake that can happen is that you do your loop right, but then when you go down with a downstroke, you go down straight, and so your ascending loop looks something like this. So that does not look very nice. It's supposed to be like a smooth swoop. So something like this, the direction of your upstroke should be parallel to your downstroke. It should be in one direction. So you can see how some of these look so irregular because of the mistakes I was showing you. So let's practice in our worksheet. Start from the waistline, go up, turn, and down. Start from the waistline, go up, do a turn, and then come back down. So let me do one freehand. So notice how I line up with the slant line. So I try to have the loops be as even as possible. Don't rush through this part because it really determines how your ascending loop is going to look. Have your loops look as even as possible. So something like this. Last one, the descending loop. So just like with the over and under turn, if you flip the descending loop around and the ascending loop around, they should look like each other. So that's one way to know if you're doing your strokes correctly. So let me demonstrate how to do the stroke using my larger brush pen. So for the descending loop, it's going to be the waistline, the baseline, and the first descender. So just like with the ascending loop, we'll start at the waistline, but instead of going up, we'll be going down. So start with a downstroke, and as you reach the first descender, you're going to slowly lift your pen up and do a loop that goes back to the baseline. So let me do that again. Start at the waistline, do a long downstroke that goes to the first descender, slowly lift your pen up, do an upstroke, and loop back into the baseline. So it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. So 1, the downstroke, 2, the turn, and 3, the upstroke going back to the baseline. So like I said, it's basically the ascending loop, but the other way around. So let's go back to the practice sheet. So go down, turn, and loop back to the baseline. Down, turn, and up. So let me do a freehand one for a demonstration. Remember to follow the slant line. Try to get the loops as consistent as possible. And once again, you will know if you're doing it right if you flip it around and it looks like the ascending loop. It's simple, isn't it? Congratulations! You've done it. You now know the 8 basic strokes that you need for mastering calligraphy. But we're not quite done yet. You may have noticed that the basic stroke worksheet comes with some extras on the second sheet. So here's a freehand practice area that you can use to master your strokes. What I want you to do in this area is to practice all these 8 strokes without using any traceables. Something like this. Basically, writing these 8 strokes over and over again together until you get hang of how your brush pen works, how to increase and decrease your pressure, and how to create those smooth looking strokes without any errors at all. Soon, these will become second nature to you, and you'll be able to do these without struggling. So that's what I've designed the freehand practice for, but how you use it is totally up to you. Then the other thing you might notice in the worksheet is the just for fun section. So in this section, I've put 2 words that I feel like really encompass all the basic strokes together. So let's do one together. So I'm sure you can already spot some of the basic strokes over here. You can already spot that the H has an ascending loop. And this part over here is a compound curve. Then the letter E is almost like an underturn, but with a loop on the edge. Then the 2 letter L's are obviously the ascending loop once again. And then you have a variation of the oval. So don't worry about getting this wrong at all. This is a very advanced tutorial, but I just wanted to give this to you to let you know what you'll be doing in the future in the next tutorial. The entire point of this just for fun section is for you to understand how to dissect bigger words into basic strokes so you can do them more easily. So this is an ascending loop. Then we have a compound curve. Then there's a variation of the underturn. Then we have the two ascending loops. And then a variation of the oval. For the sake of not making this video too long, I'll be doing a whole another video on lowercase alphabets where you can practice along with me. But for now, let's just do letter A together. So I've already given a sneak peek of how to form letters early on in the video, but I just wanted to go in a bit more detail. So this sheet is part of my alphabet workbook. And letter A is a free worksheet that you can download so you can practice alongside with me. Let's get right into it. The worksheet comes with numbered and step-by-step instructions, 3 spaces of traceable practice, and then a whole line just for you to freehand your practice. So we have the upstroke, the oval, and then the underturn. So continue practicing over and over again until you reach the end, and then freehand some by yourself. So from here, you're going to continue to practice the rest of the alphabets until you feel confident. Now, you have 3 options for how you want to practice. So option 1 is that you can do it on your own by following along this video and the freebies and other resources you can find on the internet. It's going to be time consuming and tedious, and you have no way of knowing if you're doing it correctly. You're going to grow frustrated really easily. Option 2 is my lowercase workbook with all 26 alphabets in my style. It's a paid product, but it takes the guesswork out of your practice, and you get a resource that's actually teaching you the correct form and how it's meant to be done. You will get lifetime access to 26 pages of step-by-step guidance. Plus, letter A is free to download, so you can try it before you buy. And since you have made it this far into the video, I have a little gift for you. You can use my code MMPractice for 20% off. Option 3 is the cheaper version of my paid workbook. It only comes with the guide and no worksheets if you don't feel like spending too much money. The choice is yours, whichever option fits you best. Next time, we'll discuss how to connect letters to form words, like I showed you here in the Just for Fun section. Need a refresher on calligraphy? Check out my No BS guide or my brushment technique right here. I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.